I go out one night like I did often back then. I would just go out and want to have a good time. So I'm at a place called Pyramids Nightclub on US 41. I'm having the time of my life. I had a few drinks, and a guy comes up to me that I'd seen a few times, and he's like, "Hey man, do you want to buy a stereo?" I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I don't own a car, but I'll buy a car stereo. That sounds like a good idea." So I get in his car. We drive back to my hotel. I leave him at the front. I go inside where I kept my signing bonus in a sock. I go inside, grab a couple $100 bills out, put the sock back in my room. I give it to him. I get the stereo. I put it in my hotel room, and I head back to Pyramids because I'm not missing the rest of this night. I'm still jamming, rocking away. I make my way back to the hotel, right? And there's police lights everywhere. I'm like, this isn't good. And I look up to my room, which is one of those hotels that faced out to the outside, and they're all around my room. There's people dusting for prints. I'm like, I just bought a stolen stereo. No, the guy had come back, busted in my wall, ransacked my room, took the money that was in my sock, not the security deposit box, and ran off with the rest of my signing bonus.
But did he take the stereo?
No, I kept the stereo and I sold it to all the Latin guys who had cars.
What's your Latin name?
What?
What?
What'd you say to me?
Pedro?
Oh, that's my, yeah, I'd slide that onto my Facebook page so that people wouldn't come find me.
Oh, there you go. It's your alias.
Pedro, you just gave it away. Thanks.
You gotta find people don't know that?
Huh?
They don't know that?
People who know me know that.
Oh, what about Moylo?
Moylo is just something that I've been called for a long, long time.
So
It was the OG nickname that.
But the sledge.
The sledge came later. Yeah, that was a few stories led to that one, but yeah, the sledge was my player's nickname, Sledgehammer. But I told MLB that it was because I like to talk a lot of crap, and in Australia, if you're sledging someone, it means you're talking. So I was able to get it past MLB, but it was Sledgehammer.
Well, what did people think it meant in America?
They just think it's Sledgehammer, especially when I stood next to Hamill.
Did you look down when you said that?
Yeah, look, you did. I'm trying to give signs. I don't want to say the obvious. I'm just trying to give signs out.
I'm trying to figure out where it really came from.
I've been in a lot of clubhouses and I've showered with a lot of dudes. And when you get those nicknames, you can make your own assumptions.
Sure, yeah. Oh, self-proclaimed or no?
I didn't nickname myself. No, I never would. I use what everybody else calls me.
I was one of the dudes that showered with him, but I did not give the nickname. So it's 2016, 17, Moylan and I shared the same clubhouse in Kansas City, and Pete's one of the most unique human beings I've been around. I mean, from being a barista to pitching in the big leagues, to being a position player in the minor leagues, to WBC. I mean, you have had so many unique stories and perspectives from your life. So when we talked about getting our squad together, I mean, this guy can relate to anybody baseball wise. He's been away from Australia, his homeland, doing all this stuff. And I mean, stories for days from this guy, and he's a perfect guy to be on the team.
Oh, I appreciate it. When you guys reached out, I was fired up. Obviously, I didn't know much about you, but when I read about you, I was like, this is going to be something different and cool. And I felt like we had a really close bond in the 2 years that we spent together in Kansas City, and we had similar personalities. We were similar guys in the clubhouse that would just make people relax. But at the same time, if something had to be said, then we had a way of saying it that didn't offend anybody. So yeah, that's why I'm here. And I think I can relate to a lot of people. There's not much that this baseball world and world in general has thrown at me that I don't feel like I can speak on. And I've had good times, I've had tough times, I've had it all. So I felt like now that I'm at the end of it, I'm in a great place, and there's some stories to be told.
We keep talking about, we might start calling you Pedro the Cat, because we say you've lived 9 lives.
Yeah.
Where does that all start?
So it starts, I guess, when I signed. Like the first time I signed, I'm in Australia. I'm throwing 84 miles an hour. And there was a few guys from Australia that had signed before me, but there wasn't a lot. And I'm at a tournament and I'm pitching and caught the eye of the twin scout, and then he eventually signs me.
How old are you here?
17.
Okay.
And that was the first time that I was like, in my mind, I'd always thought, okay, well, I'll sign and I'll go over and I'll give this thing a real chance, and I think I can do this. And then, like I've said before, I got here and it was the biggest culture shock. It was the biggest talent shock. I saw everybody around me and I was like, I am not built for this. And I think that was my initial, I'll use that as an excuse to let myself go a little crazy. And I never took my first shot at this seriously. I can honestly say that. And the results probably showed it. And then what I did off the field showed it. And that ended up with me being on the beach in Fort Myers and getting arrested, and then eventually getting sent home from my first crack at this. And I'm 20 years old, I'm back in Australia, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm originally from Perth. My mum had moved to Sydney in between, so I decided to stay in Sydney. And I just had to grind. I started working for a buddy of mine who was a pool plumber. So I was doing pool plumbing for cash. Then another mate from the baseball team was a concreter. So I started installing concrete.
The sledgehammer. Installing concrete.
Installing concrete for a job. So I did everything I could, and then eventually I landed a role in sales, and that was where I felt like I can at least have a conversation with people. Maybe this is what I'm going to do, and yeah, man, I did everything you can think of, between selling pest control, selling upholstery fabric, selling security systems. Sorry, I didn't sell. I worked for a security system company. 3 months, salary, car, credit card, phone. I never sold a thing. I didn't sell a single thing. I didn't even know what I was selling, to be honest. Like they ran me through a training course, and I came out of it like still had no idea what I was really doing. I just drive around Sydney and like look for people that I could potentially call in, and never did. I didn't do any work.
So how old are you now at this point?
19, 20.
So you're still 19, you went through all those jobs?
Yeah.
After getting released, going back.
Yeah. I didn't know
6 jobs.
That was the first sales job that I got, was not selling security systems. And then I went to pest control. I worked for a company called Flick Pest Control. Right?
That was his job.
It might be more than 9 lives.
I went to sell Flick Pest Control. I was part of the commercial sales division of a Flick Pest Control. I'd call around to companies. Again, no idea what I was doing. Like, I had to judge how much it was going to cost to service this pest, like these guys' pests, whether it was a massive factory or a tiny little fish and chip shop. I'd go in there and I'd say, all right, well, this is going to be $170 a month. And they're like, yeah. I was like, oh, sweet. Okay. 12-month contract, put that in. And then, yeah, so that was the pest control job.
So during this time, did it ever cross your mind, like, I'm eventually going to get back to baseball?
No, I was done. Like, no one from Australia got a second chance. That was the thing. And early on, there was only limited visas. There was 30 visas per team, I think you're allowed to get for international players back when I first signed. So those visa spots were so valuable. Guy that put in an effort like me and had a reputation like me, teams aren't going to be going, oh, we've got to give him another chance. So I thought my whole opportunity to play baseball for a living was done. So I got home and I tried to find out what else I was going to do. And it took a while of me trying and saying yes to a bunch of different things before I eventually got comfortable. I was working in a warehouse. I went and pitched in Taiwan. Like I've sold lift chairs to retirement villages, to like, you name it, man. Eventually I landed as a pharmaceutical rep, and I ended up doing that for a few years. And I was doing that when I came over for the World Baseball Classic for the first time.
So what was so cool too was, like, in 16 and 17, that was your second go around. You're back in the big leagues.
Third, really, when you think about it.
Third.
Because of the injury. I was out of the game for 2.5 years in between. So when I went to Kansas City, it was kind of like, that's when I was in Houston and I'd blown out for the second time, and I was like,
well, let's get this timeline right, because you kind of skipped past. So right. that'd be the third go round with the WBC, getting to Kansas City, or the Braves. Now I'm confused. Wait, let's get back to when did you start getting back into baseball?
Because he went to Taiwan.
Said, yeah.
I went to Taiwan in 2003.
So you're doing these jobs. So are you playing catch? You like?
That's the thing. So my love for the game never disappeared, right? So I was still playing, coaching winter baseball and summer baseball, and still working as well. So the way that works with club baseball in Australia is you train Tuesday, you train Thursday, you play on the weekends, and that's how you keep yourself in playing shape. So I was doing that, and throwing BP for the guys, and I was hitting, playing first base. I had a couple of back surgeries. So there was all this thing that had gone on that I thought, okay, I'm definitely not. I had 2 back surgeries while I was back home just playing club baseball. So I was fragile. I thought I was fragile and I was never going to be able to the guy that was going to be able to come back and play 162 games. So no, never did I think that, even though I was still involved, that was going to lead to anything else. I got kicked off the Australian team like when I first got back because I wasn't good enough to even make the Australian team when I first got back. So I was completely off the radar for the national team, for any other club over here. I was just a guy playing club baseball.
But you still loved baseball?
Still loved it. Absolutely loved it. Was always involved. It was just something that was always there and a passion. And I knew that I was still good and had enough to give to the locals in Australia. I could still offer them enough advice and lead them in a way that could maybe help someone else get a chance to come back over here. But never did I think that it was going to result in me getting another chance. Fast forward to the WBC.
Oh, and then that was, I love this story. You literally packed for a week and you're staying there for 8 months, whatever it was.
Just to go back a little bit, we're talking about, I think it's about October of 2005.
You're how old now?
I am 20, I turned 27 that December.
So we're talking, you went back from 19.
8.5 years I was back, out of the game.
Holy shit.
Yeah, out of the game, just playing local baseball. And the story goes, I was managing a team at this stage and we needed some pitching. I'd been hitting for 2 years, but because of my back surgeries, I'm like, I'm done pitching. It's caused me, I actually blew out in Taiwan. That's why I stopped pitching in the second time, because I was like, this is too much. Like, this is 2 back surgeries in 2 years. Maybe it's the pitching that needs to stop. So I'm hitting and playing first base, raking, by the way. I'm hitting and playing first base. We need some pitching for that team. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I've done this for 2 years. Maybe if I keep the same kind of mechanics and I just drop my arm down and I spin and throw, I haven't had any pain with my back. Maybe I can get through an inning or 2 for the guys on the weekend. Let's see how it goes.
You dropped down. Were you over the top?
I was over the top.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I drop down, play catch in the outfield, feels pretty good. Jump on the mound, throw a few bullpens, feels great. I launch myself into local baseball in Australia and I'm throwing the ball great. I have no idea. There's no one there with a radar gun. There's no one even watching. We're just doing it because we love the game. I get asked to come down and throw an inning and play first base for the state team. There happen to be some scouts for the Australian team watching other players to scout for the WBC. They see me pitching. They talk to me after the game. He comes up to me and says, hey man, do you have any idea how hard you were throwing? I was like, no. He said, you were sitting 94, you touched 96. I'm like, what? His reaction was the same. He said, there's no way. Like, he's whacking the gun. Like, are you kidding me? I was 88 to 90 when I was 17, 18 years old, and all of a sudden I'm throwing 96 miles an hour. So the interest level goes up. I start hearing from the Aussie team. He's like, hey, we'd love you to try out for the team. It's a squad of 60 to start off with. I'm like, sure, why not? I'll give it a crack. We play some series against the Chibalotta Marines and the Taiwanese national team. And I have a bit of success there. I throw the ball pretty well. Bobby Bonilla was managing Chibalotta then. And
it was Bobby Valentine?
Yes, I'm sorry, Bobby Valentine.
Yeah.
And he says he was going to offer me a contract to come to Japan. And so I'm thinking, okay, this might be something. But never in my wildest dreams do I think it's going to lead to anything bigger. Maybe I go to Japan, I try out, maybe I make the team. I come to the WBC, I end up making the squad, obviously. I'm pitching against Venezuela. 06 Venezuela is like unbelievable. Cabrera, Maglio Ordonez, Bobby Abreu, just to name a couple. And I'm dropping down, throwing really, really hard, but all over the place. It's in Orlando, where the Braves spring training facility is. Dayton Moore and JJ Picola in the front office. They see me pitch. They walk me around the facilities the next day and they said, hey, we think you can do this. We think you're a real chance to help us. And I'd had some interest from the Red Sox as well, but when you look at the Red Sox roster, they just were the team that would go and grab the best of the best and bring it over. Whereas the Braves in 05 had called up 11 rookies and still were successful. So I figured that if I go to AAA there, I'm more of a chance to get called up. I signed with the Braves. I'm there in AAA for 2 appearances and I get called up. April 12th, I haven't pitched above rookie ball. I've pitched 2 innings in AAA, and now I'm in the big leagues.
That's wild.
I'm like, this is not real. So 14 years later,
no way.
I'm still,
like
still in the big leagues.
So you just look around and you're like, how the hell did I get here? You know
every single day that I was in the big leagues. Early on, and this is where I go back to I think I rubbed a few people the wrong way when I first came over here. I've got a big personality, and I was 27 years old, and I was getting treated like a rookie, and I didn't appreciate it. I enjoyed my time in AAA in 2006 more than I did the big leagues. The guys down there they accepted me better. It was kind of like, and I get it now that I look back. It was them trying to make me earn my spot. I was this guy from the World Baseball Classic, they'd never heard of me before. They were calling me
from a low level.
They were calling me the wild thing, before the WBC because of my glasses. It was the whole thing. So I needed to really settle down and start to take this seriously, so I didn't make the same mistakes as I did the first time.
That's what I loved in Kansas City too, when it was go around round three, like every day, Moylan, you could tell you were so thankful and happy to be there, because I feel like when something gets taken away from you for 8 years, a long period of time, you appreciate it every day in the big leagues. And I think sometimes as a young guy, days go, one after another, you can take some of these days for granted. And now, not playing anymore, you certainly understand that a lot more. So I always enjoyed that perspective. And that's what I always took from playing with you, is like, man, each and every day in the big leagues, I mean, you are enjoying that day like it's your last one.
Well, because of all the injuries that I've had 2 Tommy Johns. I've had 1 shoulder surgery, but 3 separate things were worked on. The 3 back surgeries, I ended up having another back surgery when I was over here as well. So, it was all, I'd had to deal with so much and had to come back from so much. I thought I was done in probably 2013 when I was with the Dodgers. 2014, I go to spring training with Houston, and that's when I blew out my Tommy John again. And that's when I really looked at myself and looked around, and I was still youngish. I was mid-30s, and I'm like, if you're going to have another shot at this, you're going to have to take it seriously. So I cut out drinking. I really made an effort to get in the best shape of my life. But I actually did, and I was able to then sign a player-coach deal with Atlanta, almost like them throwing me a bone because of what I'd been able to do for them in the past. That's what it felt like. It was like, hey man, we know you're rehabbing. Would you have any interest in coming and coaching? And I was, back in my mind, I'm like, I still have a family that I need to support. Maybe this is my next venture after playing. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. So my days during extended and spring training were get there at 6 a.m, go through my routine, go out in the field with all the young guys, be their pitching coach. And then at the end of the day, when the game started, I'd go to the games, I'd write reports. I was full on coach mode, except for when I had to pitch. And I told you guys the other night, I ended up throwing 13 innings down in rookie ball that year because they were just really wanted to make sure that I was going to be healthy. How could you fault them? I mean, history showed that I'd had some injuries. So it was right as the extended season was going to start. I was about to go to Danville as a pitching coach, and they said, no, we're going to send you to AAA instead. So I go to AAA in 15, have an okay run there, but still felt decent enough to feel like I could compete. And then August 15th, I got called up in 15. And I think that was, through all the times that I've been called up, because of that 1.5, 2 year period where I was like, man, I'm done. Like, what am I going to do? And then all of a sudden to have Brian Snitka call me and say, hey man, we need you in Atlanta. I was like, I sat at the end of my bed, I cried. It's the first time that I'd cried when I've been called up, but I just, all these emotions had hit me that I was like, holy shit, I've done it. Like I'm going to be back. It had been so long since I've been back. You know, when you're in the game and everything's going good, and even when you start to struggle, if you have the back of the baseball card, you can probably stretch your career out for another couple years. Well, I'd already done that. I'd exhausted all those, hey, he's a good clubhouse guy, let's give him another shot.
Right.
Now it was time that I needed to actually put some numbers up and show that I could still pitch at this level. So that 6-week period in 15 was like, man, this is it. And I was able to have some good innings for the Bravos that year. And then the next year I signed with Kansas City, and again, is the start of the third act, I guess you'd say, because I'm in Kansas City and I go to spring training with these guys and I have a horrible spring. Like, I can't get anyone out. This is my first thing, the first guy I faced took me deep. I gave up like 3 runs in my first outing. Arizona is tough for guys like us anyway, because the ball just doesn't move.
And the ball flies.
And the ball flies.
Yes.
So I'm having a horrible spring. I'm thinking I'm probably going to get released. And then we had some exhibition games, I think against Arizona, maybe. And I ended up throwing the ball pretty well and got sent to AAA, which I think whoever decided that, whether it was Dayton or JJ, but I go to AAA and I throw 12 scoreless innings and I'm looking around, I'm like, man, I'm wasting my bullets. I know in my own head, I feel as good as I've felt in years. As I said, I cut out drinking, I was fit, I was ready to go. And I called JJ and I'm like, hey man, we need a meeting. Like, I need to see you face to face. I need you to feel what I'm feeling right now. So to his credit, he comes to Omaha and we sit in an office and I'm like, look, I don't want to be the PCL pitcher of the year. All right. I've still got enough. I can do this. Give me a chance. And he was like, look, we're trying. There's just no spots right now. Unfortunately, I don't see it happening. And I think within 3 days, Chris Medlin and Chris Young both got hurt and they needed an arm. And I got called up and I was like, all right, now this is my time to shine. And I was able to have 2 pretty decent years in Kansas City and now I'm here, man.
Wow.
So being a young guy, like you said, maybe not treating it the way you should treat it.
Yeah.
And then being round 2, round 3, going from player, coach, like going above and beyond. So like mentally, you mentioned family, you mentioned some other things about getting in shape, but how do you make that that big of a change mentally to, okay, my diet, my lifestyle, everything needs to change? Like, what was it that really, really hit home for you to be like, all right, I need to change this?
Well, I think it was a couple of things. It was the fact that this was legitimately, it was either now or never. Like, you were going to have to make a total lifestyle change. I don't think I would have had the post-baseball career that I'm having now if I didn't get those last 3 years. Like, I was able to establish friendships and relationships, and I had a different perspective then too, because I was older, I was more mature. The decision itself was pretty easy because it was now or never, like I said. But the fact that I was able to stretch that into 3 extra years and create those friendships, and like I said, see the game with more respect, I guess. I had more of an appreciation for what it was that I had early on and potentially could have squandered back in the early days. And then even the second chance, because I didn't take care of myself like I should have when I first got to the big leagues even, because it was just a different game. We didn't worry about sleep. We didn't worry about, it was just about, we get to the next city, we're going to have a good time. Let's make sure we're having a good time. And that's always been my personality. And that's probably part of the reason why I got in trouble, was because I was always looking to have the good time rather than lock in and focus. So when I was able to mentally say, okay, let's focus all your energy on actually doing this, it changed me as a person, and it changed my baseball career. Absolutely.
I'm waiting for you to pick this apart.
Did you? Yeah. So did anyone help you with that kind of this awareness that you needed to change, or was that just
it just happened naturally?
Naturally.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you just had to look at me to know that. I can show you some photos from back in the day where. Yeah, it was,
I think we've seen something.
We should run a competition. Yeah, there was a point where I got up to 260 pounds, and like I carried it well, obviously, but my cheeks and neck might say something else. But yeah, it was time. I needed to really lock in, and I was rehabbing at the same time, so it kind of gave me 12 months. I knew that I was going to have a window of 12 months. The off season, although it seems 3 months is a long time to get in the shape you want to get into, if you're trying to make that kind of drastic change, the off season isn't enough time. I knew that I had 12 months. I'd just blown out. I wasn't going to do anything. It was my second one, probably more than 12 months. So I knew that I had the time to really make effective changes that were going to, I probably lost a little bit too much weight and got a little, I guess, too skinny. But it evened out across that 2015 player coach season where I was able to get back into the ideal 220, 225 shape and start throwing some bowling ball sinkers again.
We talked about earlier how guys that rehab Tommy John, how hard that is on a player mentally. You know, for 8 to 12 months, you're going to be out of the game. So that mindset of knowing it's going to be about a year before I can compete and play in baseball again, like that's tough to go through and have to go to the field every day knowing you're not getting in a game.
Yeah, when you get injured, anytime a guy gets injured, I'll call him up and the first thing that I tell him, I want to normalize the feelings that the guy is about to experience. Basically say, you're going to experience the same process of the grieving process when you lose a loved one. You're going to have denial, and then you're going to be sad, then you're going to be angry, then you're going to be depressed, and then you're going to have this acceptance, like, okay, I'm going to come back. And then one day you're going to be driving down the street, everything's good, and then you're just going to get pissed all over again, or you're going to start crying all over again, and you're going to recycle that, go through those emotions all over again. You're going to feel alienated. You're going to feel like you're not helping the team. You're going to feel, you're just going to question your entire identity. And it also happens when guys get released or guys retire or guys are out of the game. It's like, I've been playing baseball my entire life, and now who am I? What am I going to do? And so what's interesting to me, did you have any of that? Let's go back to 17. When you finished playing at 17 and you went back and your family, you'd just been arrested, you had your experience in the States, did you go through any like, okay, who am I? What am I going to do? Like,
It wasn't that deep. It was more of it was a necessity. Like, okay, well, maybe now it's time you got to find something else because there was no going back to the States. Yeah. So that's why I did so many of those jobs. I was trying to find what it was that I was going to continue on, and it was just a. I talk about how immature I was, and I keep bringing that up because I think it's important to. I still find myself thinking with that immature mind sometimes, but I've now realized that you have to grow up at some point. You have to make decisions that are going to be impactful at some point. So I think everything that I've had to go throughout my life has got me to this spot, and I wouldn't change a thing. That's the crazy part. I would have loved to have the Eric Hosmer drafted high on the cover of Baseball America, but that wasn't going to be me. So I've had to figure it out different ways, and like each pathway has just been more of me being open to something different every single time, and it's just led me back or led me through my life.
This is why I think it's so hard. You got to take these personality tests with a grain of salt, especially remember like new drafts. Yeah. Let's see what kind of makeup this guy has. It's intangible. Who would have thought that what you experienced? Who would have guessed at 17? Oh, we're going to tell, this guy is not only going to come back, he's going to come back and have this career and impact these people and be this kind of teammate. People who coaches, players, teammates probably would have thought there's no way.
I think the reason why, the fact that I was able to experience that 7.5 years back home and learn how the other half live, it gave me a different perspective to be able to share with these guys that they probably, like 80% of the guys that get to the big leagues have done it the standard way. High school, draft pick to the big leagues. College, draft pick to the big leagues. I was a fabric salesman before I was a pharmaceutical rep before I was a baseball player. I've done everything you can do. Ask me some questions, man. Like, I'll give you whatever you need. You need me to come fix your house? I'll come fix your house. I was installing glass splashbacks for a while. Like, just say yes to things, I think is the big answer here, the big key here.
Do you ever cut yourself some slack? And I know you can speak on this, but when me being from Miami, going to San Diego, the weirdest thing for me was my whole family's back home. We would get in from BP around 4 o'clock. The MLB, whatever channel's on, and it's an East Coast game, and they're in the 8th inning. Everyone's getting ready to go to sleep family-wise, and that was the hardest part for me as far as feeling distant. Like, I felt like I had like a 2-hour window in the afternoon to talk to people from back home, and if I didn't hit that, I wasn't going to talk to them for the day. Mm-hmm. And you guys were I mean, on the opposite side of the world, basically, from your family. So, and I know you were a young father as well.
Yeah.
So that had to have been crazy. And that is something that, like, now looking at your younger self, you got to at least feel like you got to cut yourself some slack, because this is hard what you're going through.
Yeah, and that was a great point, because when I got there, I would see guys' families show up to come watch, and I never got that for 2.5 years. You know, it was a 10,000-mile journey for my family to come and see me. So, but to the players' credit, and like what you guys were talking about when we had Moose here, but those minor league days, your parents would take kids out and they'd take them out to dinner, and if you had friends on the team, their families would come in and they'd take me out to dinner. So I still got a sense of that. But yeah, there was some lonely times. Like it was to the point where I couldn't even, there was no wiring money. Like I had what I had, and that was it. So I had to make it last. And I was making, by the time they took out the hotel and the food that they were giving us, I was making $123 every 2 weeks. That was my check. We'd all go to the bank and cash our checks and you know, sort out how much we could spend on Taco Bell and you know, all the rest of it. So it was tough, but I also, it again made me who I am and forced me to grow up a little bit.
I know you and Medlin, go ahead if you want to speak on that, because I know in Japan it is same thing, you know what I mean?
You didn't have the language though. At least I could speak kind of. I could kind of speak
barely. You probably got by, but couldn't speak it. But yeah, so in Japan when I played there, I was at the end of my career. So there's so many things I want to like touch on, because your path of like getting into it, dropping off, still having the passion, then coming back, you've had it to the point where you played, you knew where you were going in high school, you got drafted high and kept moving up the ladder. And that's a stress and grind of itself, right? But tremendous success on that side, continuing to move forward, right? Even the same for me. Out of college, I didn't get drafted. I went to all these open workouts. That stretch was tough of like, can I play? But it was like a year stretch. Got signed by an indie team, stuck that out for a year, then signed with the Royals out of an open workout by JJ, Scott, and Dayton. Mm-hmm. And then just slowly stuck around and climbed, you know, short season all the way up through AAA, big league camp, go on to the Mets, go on to Japan. So it was a continual rise, which isn't, you know, I didn't ultimately get to where I wanted to be and stay, you know, having a job in the big leagues and staying there, but it was never I'm out of the game or I'm going backwards. So I'm thankful for that, because I never had to deal with that mental grind of like, oh my gosh, am I good enough? You know, it was just, oh cool, I'm steadily climbing. It's like, I just felt like the train was still rolling. Even when I got hurt and injured, or ended my career, it was like, I can't play anymore. So I didn't have can I even keep playing? And like, should I try to come back? I can't imagine what that's like, 7 years. And like still being like, I can play, and I'm gonna keep trying, and I'm getting older, like who's gonna even want me? That's a crazy, like, I can't even imagine what that's like.
I think the way that it played out made that really easy, because I don't think I would have been the baseball player had I not had that 7-year gap to work out what was going on. And because it was such a meteoric rise, I didn't have time to really process anything. I just kind of was just riding this roller coaster of every single week was something unbelievable happening, whether it was the attention of the guy from Japan, whether it was a couple of scouts coming up to me and saying, hey man, you're throwing the ball really well. I was like, yeah man, thanks, I appreciate that. Never still was I thinking bigger than let's go win this game or let's go get this guy out. So when it started to roll, I remember everybody on my team, imagine that for the guys that were on my team, like I am a coach of a club ball team, and these guys are watching their coach and a former player and their friend go through all these cool experiences and potentially do what I did. They weren't thinking the same thing. They were watching and thinking, oh, this is going to be great. You go on the WBC, that's great. You know, you get to represent Australia. And when I did make that team, I thought to myself, okay, this is my chance to prove to myself and everybody that doubted me, the guys and the Twins that released me, that, you know, I could have done it if I was a little bit more mature or if I was a little bit more ready. So I went into that WBC, wanted to prove a point, not get a big league career out of it. And like I told you, I packed for 2 weeks and I ended up staying for 8 months.
Wild. But back to the Japan, San Diego, playing in a different time zone, Australia here. And I think you're right. You're not you're giving yourself a lot of credit for, oh, I came over here and I had some family, and you could speak the language. I get that, but still being halfway around the world, when I was in Japan, when it was nighttime there, it was daytime here, and the opposite. So when I'm up, there's only a few hours, maybe a couple hours that I could call home and say hi to anybody. Yeah. When you're playing the game, no one's watching anymore. I played my whole career with family around, like whether it be it the internet or coming to games. I got to play as close to home as like an hour away when I was in Delaware. So like having family, even college, I was barely an hour from home. So parents, grandparents, siblings, always at the games. So that was very normal for me to have people around to see what you're doing. And it's fun doing that. Like I was playing for them, But to not have that, I was hurt, end of my career, I'm trying to just hang around, and now I got nobody, was a mental grind. I didn't even I had an opportunity to sign a 2-year deal, and I was like, no way.
Really?
I was like, I can't do it. And I would have gotten a buyout if I did that. I didn't do it. My career was over, my shoulder was done, so I didn't get the extra money. And at that time, for me, would have been, even now, I would have taken that. I would take the money. So, and I opted out of that because I'm like, no, either I'm going to play really well and I'm going to get my ass back to the States, or I'm going to re-sign a better contract there. Because if I would have signed a 2-year, I would have been locked into the same deal with just a minimal increase. I was like, no, I'm going to play real good, and that's going to get me back, or I'm going to get a better deal. I didn't get either of those because my shoulder just wasn't good enough. So it was like, see you later, and you don't get any money for us letting you go home. Right. So hindsight, obviously, I would have changed that, but there was no chance I was staying that far away from home. It was hard, and like you at 17 to 19, I could see how that easily could have been a huge contribution to your failure.
Well, here's another contribution to that failure. I'll tell you a funny story as to.
Funny now,
yeah. There was a lot of things that happened throughout those early days in the Twins. It wasn't just, hey, you got arrested, we're going to get rid of you. There was some lead up to that.
Was this when you got your nipples pierced?
No, this was later. That was my early life midlife crisis. Yeah. So I'm in rookie ball, and I don't show up a couple of times. Like that's a cardinal sin. Whatever you're doing the night before, you just show up. But I didn't think that way. I didn't think the way you're supposed to think. I wasn't mature enough to be there. I wasn't ready for what that was. So I would wake up late, see that I missed the bus, and instead of rushing to go to the field, I'd just go to the mall.
What?
Yeah.
Dude, that's a recurring nightmare of mine, is being late to a game.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Recurring. Yeah. If I have a recurring dream, it's that. Because in college was the worst. Like you had to bring your own uniform, everything was on you. And if I forgot my jersey one time, I left it in the hotel. Thankfully, family around. My grandfather was in South Carolina. We were playing the Gamecocks, and he had to go to the hotel that we checked out of already, I think. I was praying that he would even find it. Got it to me before we had to put our jerseys on. Because, you wear like a BP jersey. Yeah. So I could play in the game. I was scared shit that they were going to find out. You forgot your jersey? Right. You can't play. Like, that's not a late thing, but there was just all these fears in my head always about even being late to the field.
That's how you're supposed to think.
Yeah, well,
that's not
how it was a major fear.
Right? So that's where that was part of the problem. And then I go out one night, like I did often back then. I would just go out and want to have a good time. So I'm at a place called Pyramids Nightclub on US 41. I'm having the time of my life. I'd had a few drinks, and a guy comes up to me that I'd seen a few times, and he's like, hey man, do you want to buy a stereo? I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't own a car, but I'll buy a car stereo. This sounds like a good idea. So I get in his car, we drive back to my hotel. I leave him at the front. I go inside where I kept my signing bonus in a sock. I go inside, grab a couple $100 bills out, put the sock back in my room. I give it to him, I get the stereo, I put it in my hotel room, and I head back to Pyramids because I'm not missing the rest of this night. I'm still jamming, rocking away. I make my way back to the hotel, right? And there's police lights everywhere. I'm like, this isn't good. And I look up to my room, which is one of those hotels that faced out to the outside, and they're all around my room. There's people dusting for prints. I'm like, I just bought a stolen stereo. No, the guy had come back, busted in my wall, ransacked my room, took the money that was in my sock, not the security deposit box, and ran off with the rest of my signing bonus.
But did he take the stereo?
No, I kept the stereo and I sold it to all the Latin guys who had cars. So that was another story that led to
what
them.
What do you tell a young Moylan? Like, In your role today, where do you start?
Oh my gosh, that is unbelievable. More questions than anything. Just more stories. That's wild.
A lot of people tried to say, "Hey, man, like, let's calm it down a little bit." But there was no getting into my head at that stage of my life. For some reason, I don't know what it was, but I had scouts telling me, "Hey, man, you can do this. You should really clean it up." I had the guy that signed me would come and like visit and say, "Why don't you stop drinking sodas at nighttime?" Like, obviously the ADD was a thing, but it was more than that.
What's really crazy about your story? So many years ago now, I was at Fort Sam Houston in the military working with soldiers, and we were doing this session on resilience. And they're trying to enhance the resilience in this one platoon and just talk about how do we help soldiers be more tough. And there was, I forgot, it was a captain or lieutenant got up to start to speak. And he said, with soldiers, we talk about resilience and we talk about mental toughness. And he wanted us to reframe it, because when you think about tough, you think about unbreakable, you think about concrete, and you have to be tough. You have to show you're tough. You have to be relentless. He says the problem with that is, just take a rock and you think it's tough, but eventually pressure is going to come and it's going to break. And once it breaks, then it renders it's just not useful. You can't piece it back together. It's done. So he's like, let's reinvent toughness and resilience. Instead of thinking about toughness, let's frame it as flexible, adaptable, like water. Like Bruce Lee's quote, water flows, it crashes, be like water. And I'm listening to your story and just the resilience, the adaptability, the ability to tolerate uncertainty and discomfort and embarrassment sometimes maybe, or just say, hey, you know what, let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. Like where did that come from? Did you have your family like that? Yeah. How did you do that?
My mom she worked 2 jobs to get me to be able to be on state teams, and because in Australia you have to pay to go play in the tournaments to get maybe a chance to make the Australian team. So mum would work 2 jobs. She'd work at a bank during the day. At nighttime she'd go stack shelves at a local grocery store to make sure that we had enough money that I could go and be in these tournaments. So that kind of work ethic, that kind of, it doesn't matter what it needs to be, I'm just going to do what it's going to take to get this done. That probably came from my mum, if I'm honest.
It was really cool. We haven't talked about it yet, but I'm curious. How do you get into broadcasting?
That's a great question too. At the end of 2018, I go back to the Braves in 2018, and I don't have a sinker at all, and my forearm's playing up, so I'm spending a little bit of time on the IL, and I was able to meet some people during that year again. As soon as I announced my retirement in 19, Fox Sports South just happened to call me and say, hey, would you want to have a try at pre and post and see how that goes? And I'd committed to go and play in Europe in 2019 with a buddy of mine in the Czech Republic. So I said, yes, I'd do it, but I have to do 10 games before I go to Europe, and I do 10 games when I get back just to see if I like it. So tried it. Didn't know that it was going to turn into what it has, obviously. I enjoyed it, but I didn't think, and this is going to be like I didn't think I had enough of the career to have people want to listen to what I have to say, if I'm being completely honest, especially
even after 12, 13 years, however many years that was.
Right, but sure, I got 13 years, but I had some great years and I had some years that were just okay. So when you look at the body of work, it looks great, but as I said, I didn't think that was enough. I thought guys that were on television needed to be a Eric Hosmer or someone with at least that career that garnered some respect. But then I started to think, because of the impact in the clubhouses and the impact that I've had on some young guys, that a lot of those stories are going to resonate with a lot more than just the superstars. And they need to hear more stories than just the superstar guys too, because it gives perspective to a lot of those younger guys that could be watching or listening. And like you said, that resilience is a real thing. Life isn't always easy. And it's for a lot of people, it's tougher than it is easier. So I think I've said this a few times, but we can get in that trap where we just want everything to be easy for our kids, especially. We want to try to give, make sure that they don't ever feel what we've felt throughout our lives. But I think it's important that we do feel some of those emotions to make us feel the good times a little better.
Yeah, and like you said earlier too, you played every position, so you've seen the game in multiple views, multiple ways. What I love about it too, it's like, baseball gave you another chance, another opportunity, and continues to. Like, look at this, right? And now it's like you have a due diligence of giving back to the game and promoting the game, and not only here but back home too. You're going home to Australia all the time, and it's got to be so cool because when you think about an Australian player, I immediately think of a reliever that's willing to charge the hitter and be there for his team and just come after you and is not going to shy away from the zone. These guys are me versus you, and the mentality these guys have is so cool. And you think of you think of Liam Hendricks, you think of Balfour. I mean, it's got to be pretty cool and pretty special to go back to a country and understand, like, okay, like, this is us. We are the Australian player, and you guys kind of created that mold and that attitude. So that's got to be a pretty good feeling going back home and being able to do what you do back home.
Oh, it gives me pride to be able to go back, especially when I'm still involved in the game back home too. I'm coaching the next generation coming up, and I still like to be involved with the Australian team, and there's some real talent over there. So yeah, I'm so grateful that I'm still able to go back there and share not just baseball lessons, but life lessons with these guys, and just give back, like you said, to that generation that needs some assistance, needs to know that there's some light at the end of this tunnel, and Graham Lloyd was another guy that's helped me a ton as well, and there hasn't been a lot of us. So there's under 30 Australians that have made it to the big leagues over the course of, which is
I know really cool. that Winter League has got some players now. There's a lot of good young players that go out there to play out there, and that league has really, really improved each year tremendously.
We've changed the rules a little bit over there. So it used to be a very Australian league, and now we've allowed some more foreign players to come in, and it's just lifted, I guess you say, the quality of baseball as a whole. And the Aussie team now is having a lot more success. When that first WBC, we're facing Italy, Dominican Republic, and Venezuela. And we thought, okay, well, maybe we're a chance against Italy. Jason Grilli comes out and throws a 9-piece shutout against us the first night. We don't even score. We got 8 runs against us, and we lose 8-0. And we're like, now we're going to face Venezuela and Dominican. Fast forward to the last WBC, we got through to the second round. So, all these things that have made the league better and stronger has also made our Aussie team a lot stronger as well.
It's cool hearing your journey with baseball, even to the point in where you're now coaching. And we were talking about coaching and managing, and a lot of coaching now, I think it's always been the case, but the great coaches are great connectors. They're great teachers. To be able to connect with the athlete, to get on their level. And with all of your experience, your scope, your spectrum of connecting, you can connect in different ways. Nobody knows a 17-year-old Peter Moylan better than you. If you were to coach that guy at 17, like, you know him, you know how he would be to you, but he's on your team, he's under your charge. How would you coach that guy?
Man. Short of just saying he was uncoachable, because that would be a terrible answer. I think, honestly, all I was really looking for back then was support. Like, I know I'm rough around the edges, but if you guys can, rather than just berate me every time something happens, if you like, hey man, I get it, I understand, you're going through some things or whatever it is, you're away from home, like a little bit of support as a 17-year-old. And I think, there wasn't many coaches that were like me back then. It was, they would just kind of saw me as a bit of a pain in the ass, obviously. But yeah, I think I could probably now get into the head of myself. It's a very unique group, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of players that are going to have to deal with it like I did, or they're probably going to be more prepared for what the professional baseball life was going to be. That was the other thing. It was just so new and so raw that I just didn't know what to expect. So when I got over here and it was what it was, and it wasn't what I expected, and I was nowhere near as good as the guys that I was looking at, I think it's just a little bit of a, hey man, you got this, you got that. But it never felt like that was kind of around. It just felt like they were just that was a means to an end.
Who was one of the first guys? I know Medlin and you rehabbed 1 year, got super tight.
Yep.
Who was one of those guys, like first guys that come to mind when that support that you ended up, eventually getting? Is there anyone that jumps out?
Well, in the big leagues, it was when I first got there, it was guys like Tim Hudson. Tim Hudson was there, and he was a guiding light for me. As crazy as it sounds, Marcus Giles was a guy that was like, hey man, this is what time we need to be at the bus, and all those little things that you just don't know. But there was other guys along the way too that forced me to grow up, because the stuff that I was doing was unacceptable. And that was something that I hadn't really been told before. It was just, I did my own thing and didn't really care what anyone else said. So I knew when I came back, and I knew when I was looking at these guys that, okay, look at them, look at where they're at, look at where you want to be. Maybe you should start listening to some of this advice. And that was a real turning point. 27 years old was when I think I was able to, okay, let's kick it into gear a little bit.
Pretty cool how a position player too can, you're a bullpen guy, he's a second baseman, and he still finds a way. Like, that's got to make you now kind of look for, all right, who is that 17-year-old Moylan in there? And like, I'm going to make sure I reach this guy.
If there's anybody around, man, I can get to him, trust me. Yeah.
That's awesome.
We got a lot of, that's like a crazy story, but I know you have some crazy, funny stories that you look back on now, because the attitude that you have and your character is awesome. Mm-hmm. So you're able to look back on some things like getting arrested and tell these stories. And I know I keep mentioning your nipples getting pierced. You've had midlife crises, you're tatted up, earrings, tongue rings.
Don't forget the tongue.
Rings, yeah. Tell me some of those stories, because
so I'll tell you about how it went down. I'll give you the details of the arrest and the post-arrest, okay? So Ramada Inn on Fort Myers Beach. There was a little bit of an after party. It was spring break. I think at this stage I might have been 18 or 19, but I was still young. And again, I like to have a good time. Music's playing, and I was a bit of a dancer, so I'm dancing around, and I guess I was dancing with the wrong female at the time, and I was challenged by a young man who came over and basically just threw a punch at me, and I'm like, okay, oh my goodness, what's going on?
You matrixed?
I matrixed him. Yeah, at the time I thought I was doing that. Just a simple pushback to try and defend myself, and then the next thing I know, I was in handcuffs and up against the wall. As a young Australian kid, if that happened anywhere in Australia, if that happened in the middle of the street, guys would just be like, come on guys, sort it out. What are you guys doing? But that led to me being put into the back of a car and driven off down to Lee County Jail, where I ended up being put in a cell, processed, fingerprinted, and sat there for a few hours. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any money. So the only thing I could think about was to call the first round draft pick from that year and say, hey man, you're the only guy I know that's got some cash. I need $75. Can you come down and bail me out of jail? And he's like, Michael Restovich. He's like, yeah man, I'll come down. So while I'm waiting for him to come down, there was a phone and a toilet. So I just started calling reverse charges to all my boys back home. Hey man, guess what? I'm in jail. What? No way. Hang up. I eventually called my mum. It's April Fool's in Australia. She doesn't believe me. So I'm calling my mum. She thinks it's an April Fool's joke the whole time. So hang up. Eventually, obviously, I get released and I get sent home and she realizes that it's real. But yeah, that whole night obviously sent my life on a different trajectory than I ever thought I was going to be. But
that dude's a real one for answering the phone and coming through and bailing you out.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it was, like you said, late night in the morning, early
I had
morning.
to go in the next day and front up to the front office. And I go in, I sat down, I said, look, this is what happened. Like I just explained it wasn't as big a deal as it turned out to be. And if it had been in Australia, I don't think I would have been looked at by the cops. But I think it was spring break. They were just trying to tidy some things up down there. But when I walked in, they already knew. The twins had already knew what had gone down. So, but the bastards made me do the whole day of activities, including a 3-mile run around the playing lot before they released me in the afternoon. So I go in, I think I've got away with it. I'm doing all the drills. I'm like, yes, I'm going to refocus. This is my time. See you, buddy, you're out of here.
It's cold-blooded.
Yeah, it is cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
You got to have some good ones of this guy playing with the Royals for 2 years.
So he had, one of the 9 lives, like you said, Moylan was a barista. So when he got to Kansas City, he had an empty locker next to him and he brought a big espresso machine in there. and we started to call him Sledgiatos. He would make these pregame coffees for everybody right there in his locker. It'd be like 30 minutes before the game, and I'm like, Sledge, I need one, buddy. I need some energy right now. Let's go. And he's like, you want a double or you want a single? And we would go doubles every time. We ended up making t-shirts, to which my dad wears all the time when he cuts the lawn. He like cut like the crew neck part, cut it out here to get some sun, and it just says Sledgiatos right here.
That's awesome.
So he did that, it took off, and then I'll always remember too, like on the road, there was a group of like 6, 7 guys that we would just always like migrate to Moylan's room and hang out. And it was some of the best times. And that's like the stuff when people talk about now, the post-playing career, those nights in the room, the bus rides, that's the stuff you miss the most, because those are just priceless moments of just interactions with guys that, you know, from all over the world. And it's just, there's priceless interactions.
Just imagine a guy that like I said, is now back in the big leagues for his 3rd act. He's thrown the ball decent. He's having good years. My whole demeanor was different than it's ever been. I was having so much fun. Like these guys were unreal. They just come off back-to-back years. They were a unit like I'd never been around before. It was a family. It was just, everything was going so great at that time of my life. And I was able to be that happy guy every day that showed up in the clubhouse and just made sure everybody around me was at least having a good time or was taken care of. And if they weren't, felt like I was a guy that they could come to and lean on.
The barista stuff wasn't just a hobby though. Live number 6.5 was
6.5. I invested in a cafe in Melbourne. Started a coffee shop with a buddy of mine in Melbourne called the Apollo Cafe. Didn't have a lot to do with it, but would go there every off season and make sure that it was functioning okay. That's where the love of coffee came. But just coffee in general is just a massive part of Melbourne culture and Australian culture. And I felt like it was important that we got away from the almond milk and got back to the real coffees.
Do you bring your own beans here? Like, are there beans in?
So that's the crazy part. I would start getting roasters from around the country sending me coffee to give to the guys. So I'd get all this free coffee sent to the clubhouse. So I never had to buy coffee. Alex Gordon ended up buying an extra coffee machine that he'd take on the road with him because he wanted it so bad. So we had one in the clubhouse at home and then one that would be dragged around in this plastic container to every single road trip that we went to make sure that everybody got their coffees.
They're sending us, remember that milk? The
Chateau milk.
Oh,
shout out so Chateau in Kansas City, the best flavored milk in the world.
They were, we would do the Sledgiatos with that milk. Oh my God, it was so good.
I can make you guys one if you need it.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. What about your putter company? You're a big golfer, right?
Oh yeah, that's cool.
2020 rolls around.
Another story. Yeah. Another life.
2020 rolls around and I was in Europe in 2019 and 2020 was going to be my busting out into television. And then COVID hits. And I'm like, I go from having potential however many dates I was going to have to there's no baseball and you are going to be done. So I didn't know what to do. I can't sit still as it is. I'm at the house. My buddy sends me a photo of his daughter's Jordan on his putter. And I'm like, ding, 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 ding. I've got to figure out what size shoe it fits on the putter and I've got to turn this into something. So I dived into that. That was my whole focus during COVID. Did some Instagram direct ads. I learned how to do all that. I was taking photos of these shoes. I actually bought a foam putter cover off Amazon and cut the bottom of it off, sewed it, hand sewed it, and then I'd put that inside the shoe to make it turn from just a baby shoe into an actual putter cover. I then sent that prototype off to Taiwan. I had a guy, I paid for tooling, I had 500 made, shipped back to me, and that's when I started putter kicks at the time and started selling putter covers to clubs, to guys. I just put it on eBay to see what the test price was going to be, and someone paid $65 for it. So that was my pricing.
Now I have one, but it's not his. Apparently,
it's not.
There's another company called Sneaker Putt, which. Are you still going with this company?
I'm not. I still have the inserts. I still have everything I need to start it back up if I needed to, but I started selling the inserts that I had made to another guy on Instagram so that he could use it and actually turn them into putters. It's a really, really cool product when you see it, but I realized then that I just needed something to focus on all the time, and I think that was another lesson learned, that you give me something to lock in on and I can now figure out how to do it.
I think about this. You've just figured it out. Your life, whatever situation you come across, it seems like everything is figure outable. You're just finding a way to figure it out. And it's I heard a definition of success. Someone once said that success isn't just a collection of the things you've accomplished, but a collection of things you've overcome. And I just think that's just so powerful. All the things that you have overcome to be where you are and to see where you're going to be going. It's just so cool to just see all these things that you've been able to figure out along the way.
Thank you, man. That means a lot. And even at the end of my career, like a lot of guys will talk to me, hey, how did you get into media? How did you decide what you wanted to do when you were done? And the biggest thing that I told myself is just start saying yes to things. Like a lot of guys that retire, they worry about losing that free time that they've had, whether it's the off season or whether it's that free time during the season. They're afraid that if they commit to something, they're going to lose all that. But you get to the situation where you start saying yes to some things and you can work out that you can make your own schedule and you find out other things that you enjoy and other things that you're even good at that I had no idea that I could potentially be good at. So I guess that would be my biggest message is that, there could be tough times right now, but around the corner could be something absolutely incredible that you never even see coming.
Last thing, you said yes. You said you say yes to a lot of things now. So you said yes to this.
Yeah.
Why?
I saw as much as you think you weren't able to verbalize what your vision was, I could see how passionate you were about this project. And I could see that it was going to be something different and something that we hadn't seen in this baseball space. I think you said it early on when I heard you talking about it. You said the baseball media, there's some good media out there, some really good media, but there's also some stuff that just doesn't need to be around. And I thought that this setting in itself and the comfort that this would immediately give players, that it wasn't a guy just asking questions and going like this. I think we could really get into some subjects that need to be spoken about. And I wanted to be a part of it.
Go ahead.
No, that's what I love about it is like you do the broadcasting stuff, you do some fun stuff with John Boy online and all that type of thing. And people from the outside, you're a funny guy. They see that character side of you that brings so much joy and entertainment to people. But now that people are going to be able to dig deep into the stories and the perspective and everything you went through, that's why we got an unstoppable team here. And I'm so fired up for it.
Yeah, when he mentioned your name and we got in touch with you and we were on that first Zoom and we're talking about why we want to do this and what this is all going to be about, and you're saying, I don't want to do the traditional media. I want to change that. And so we're talking about what that means, like what's the traditional media versus what can we do with this? And the first thing I think we all think of is like, we don't want to be, how did it feel to hit that home run? And that question came up and he's telling me, he's like, oh yeah, I don't want it to be the guy, like, oh, how did it feel to hit the home run? Like, oh, how do you think it felt? I had a fucking boner. I was like, this guy's perfect, let's go. Dude, it was so fun.
That was the first interview.
That was the first interview. Sign him up.
The slang.
Look, there's going to be, I can't obviously think of everything that I've experienced in my life so far, but there's going to be stories that are told that's going to trigger something in me that I think, again, he's going to bring up a story that is another life lesson, because I've been through so many and I've had to learn so many, and it's not just the traditional places that these lessons are coming from. Like I said in an earlier episode, a lot of my guidance has come from one of my daughters who's half my age. So it's like, you just gotta be open to what people are saying and make sure that you're not too cut off from the world.
Man, doggy.
You're the man.
Let's get it.
Welcome to the show.
To the move, brother.